So 4 shoulder mobility assessments you're probably not doing. The first one, we all know how to do the basic stuff, right? Shoulder flexion, both arms go up, blah, blah, blah. Abduction, both arms go out. Hand behind back reach, hand behind head reach. But very few clinicians, when I interview clinicians, I get to watch a lot of clinicians do shoulder assessments. Very few use midline external rotation. And that is actually one of the hallmark signs that you're dealing with either shoulder osteoarthritis or a capsular contracture adhesive capsulitis. And the reason is that just about every single time the capsule goes into a contracted state, which is going to be with shoulder OA or capsulitis, the anterior inferior portion of the capsule contracts and the person loses midline ER. So while they might have limitations in the overhead motion because they have a shoulder impingement or they have a swollen bursa or they've got a rotator cuff tear and they're limited by pain, the only real thing that'll ever limit midline external rotation passively is a capsular restriction. So you can do it in standing, you can do it in supine. It's just super, super simple. The first thing we're going to do is have you compare right versus left. So I simply ask my patient to keep their elbows touching their rib cage, palms up, and rotate both arms open like this without losing contact between the elbow and the body. Go ahead and do that now. And hopefully you guys can see that Andrew actually has a mobility deficit on this left side. So by seeing it bilaterally like this, you can obviously tell that this side's limited, that side's not bad. So the next thing you're going to do is right from this position, you can ask him to drop the other arm there, you're going to come in and apply overpressure. Now the key to applying overpressure in midline external rotation is that you have to not just push from here, you have to push from here too. So from this position, I'm going to apply pressure with my right hand in towards his rib cage while pulling with my left hand out towards me like this. And what I'm looking for is physiological end feel. Y'all kind of learned about accessory end feel, right? We all learned accessory end feel, but physiological end feel is just as important, probably more important in my opinion than accessory motion. So when you get to that end position, what you're looking for is the distance between the first point of resistance and the second point of resistance. So for him, his R1, the first point of resistance is right there. His R2 is over there. What I feel between R1 and R2 is basically his end feel. And so for him, it feels relatively firm, but it doesn't feel entirely capsular. So I have to go on to sort of the next step to find out if he's got a true capsular restriction in the shoulder. That's accessory motion. Now we all learned in school accessory motion is done in a supine position on the table. You grab the shoulder and you push from the front. I really don't like that for a number of reasons. I do it every now and then, but I really actually like to do accessory motion in a seated position. So you have to have gloves on to do this unless you like armpits. Do you like armpits? I don't like armpits either. What you want to do is you want to place your hand inside the axilla with a V up inside like this, and then you're going to grab the inside of the humerus with your hand. So I don't have very big hands, so most of y'all should be able to do this. Up inside, get as tight as you possibly can, and then have the person rest and drape their forearm on the inside of your forearm, and you know the arm is relaxed when the wrist is relaxed. If their wrist is up like this, hold your wrist there, there's a very good chance the arm is off, so all you have to do is come over here and say, relax your wrist. That'll actually shut the shoulder off. It's a pretty cool trick. The next thing I had to do is put my body up against the outside of his arm like this, and what that's doing is it's pinning his arm between my body and my inside hand. That's important. If I don't actually pin the arm, and I try to do this like this, I have to rely on the size and strength of my hand in order to produce the technique, but I don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to use my body as much as I can, so even if I have small hands and a big arm, I can still do the technique. The other hand's going to come around the backside, and I'm going to block his shoulder blade with the base of my palm, and I'm going to grab his clavicle with the tips of my fingers. What that's going to do is it's going to stabilize the scapula so that as I push and pull here, the scapula does not protract and retract underneath my hand. Now here's a little power tip. You want to take your index finger and your thumb and see if you can get them over to the joint line. So these two fingers are palpating the joint line. The palm and these three fingers are stabilizing the scapula. Now, when I apply the technique, both forwards and backwards, I want to make sure that I am not just pushing with this hand, I am actually counter-pressing with the other hand by exactly the same amount. What that'll do is it actually won't move his scapula. It'll make sure his scapula doesn't move, and his humerus moves on his scapula. Hope that makes sense. So here we go. Up underneath, relax the arm, pin it against the body, make sure the wrist is completely relaxed, nice and tight, squeeze the humerus, other hand, We're going to go to the spine of the scapula, just below it with the base of the palm, over top the clavicle. Index finger touches the anterior aspect of the humeral head. The thumb is on the posterior aspect. And then I'm going to watch his face. You're always watching your patient's face whenever you do any assessment, and that is to look for pain. I'm going to shift my body weight to my right. That's my posterior glide. And that was a little clunky. You actually can feel that little clunk at the back. And then we're going to do an anterior glide. I'm going to shift my body to the left. Now, it's important to note that the scapular plane is not anterior to posterior. It's not in the sagittal plane. The scapular plane is 30 degrees this way. So I want to make sure that when I'm applying this technique, I'm not just pushing this way and this way. I actually have to feel where the plane is. So as I start to apply the pressure, I'm following and feeling where that humerus is going. Anterior to posterior, posterior to anterior, and I'm going to go right into my inferior. So for that, I'm just going to take the base of my palm, hold the back of his scapula up a little bit, and then just sink my body weight down. I can check for a sulcus sign, and I'm just going to get a general capsular mobility that way as I just drop down. You can even pull his humerus towards you and assess a little bit the lateral glide. Now, those of you that know me, I'm not a huge fan of accessory motion. I actually think it's the least valuable mobility assessment that you can do. But if you're trying to differentiate between a true capsular restriction and muscular restriction, you're not sure, then you add the accessory motion in there. And I like to do it in this position because I can get A to P, P to A, inferior and lateral, all in the same position without changing my hands, just go right from one to the other. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so that is secret number 2. Secret number 3, we're going to do motion palpation. So now I want to assess the congruity of his actual glenohumeral joint. Now this is like perfect if I have a patient where I'm, again, trying to decide, let's say the patients in their 60s and they've got very limited shoulder mobility and it came on over the course of a year and you're like, is this adhesive capsulitis or osteoarthritis? When they have osteoarthritis of the shoulder should really be noisy. If they get to bone on bone, you'll get cogwheel noises, which is the sound of like a door creaking. What happens is when you get bone on bone, there's so much friction between the bony surfaces that what you'll actually feel is the bone moving, like wanting to move, and then it'll slip and then slip again. And it actually sounds like a creaking noise. It's very disturbing the first time you actually hear the osteoarthritic joint do the cogwheel. But the way that you actually assess that here, the way you bring it out, is you have the person move through circumduction and IRER, rotary motions, while their muscles are on. And what that does is when you contract your muscles, it'll actually suck the humeral head into the glenoid. And as that deltoid contracts and the rotator cuff contracts and you're trying to move the arm, that increased compression of the muscle activation causes essentially a grind test between the glenoid fossa and the glenoid. So it looks like this. What I want you to do is you're going to go here. This hand's going to palpate. I'm just going to place it over Andrew's shoulder like this. And when you do this, you want to make sure that all of your fingers are out and they're spread. So you are assessing as much of the shoulder as possible. If you do this or you do this, you're losing some of that tactile feedback from the shoulder. So make sure that hand is completely open. Place it over the shoulder. Block the position of the elbow with your body. Scoot towards me just a little bit, would you? Mm-hmm. There you go. Block the position of the elbow with your body, and then ask your patient to internally and externally rotate against your resistance. So go ahead and do that now. Pull in, push out. Pull in, push out. So that's IRER. And then go ahead and circumduct the arm. So make circles. Yep. And if he didn't know what I meant, I'll just basically make a circle and say, now keep doing that. And I'm going to resist him. So as he goes that way, I'm pulling. As he pushes down, I'm pulling up as he makes a circle. And I can feel in Andrew's shoulder right there. You felt it, the click. Oh, yeah. So right, keep going. Right there's a click and then change direction. So in Andrew, by the way, we're suspecting he's actually got a labral issue and not a capsular contraction because as you can see, he's got all of his ER, so he doesn't have capsulitis. Good for you. But we're worried about his labrum. So when you do that, you're actually grinding the glenohumeral joint. So in the case of osteoarthritis, that's going to be noisy as hell. In adhesive capsulitis, just true adhesive capsulitis with no osteoarthritis underneath it, that really shouldn't make any noise unless they've also got some other problem. So, secret number 4, motion palpation. One hand on, have the person go through some IRER and circumduction of the shoulder, resist it through the whole thing, and see what you feel on this side. That's how you pick up the cogwheel sounds, that's how you pick up the pops and the clicks. And if you're looking for a labral pathology, that's how you can pick up a clunk in the shoulder or any other motion. All right, so let's go ahead through the total motion concept of the shoulder. Now this concept comes out of the sort of baseball world, if you will. And the notion behind the total motion concept is that it's very difficult to understand whether someone's internal or external rotation range of motion is normal if you're only looking at just one of those two things. The idea is that if you take the joint through IR and ER and you add the motion together, the left side should equal the right side. So if normal external rotation is 90 degrees, let's just say, and normal internal rotation is 60 degrees, 90 plus 60 is 150. If he has 150 on this side and 150 on this side, that's his normal and everything is copacetic. And we can do the same thing on the hip. Prone, IR, ER, we measure one side and the other side. That's the total motion is IR plus ER. In baseball players, the reason this is important, if you started if you started playing baseball, this is my DPT mentality, right? If you started playing baseball when you were really, really, really little, what you get is humeral retrotorsion. In other words, the humerus bone grows retrotorsed. It grows externally rotated. So that pitchers get this physiological adaptation where they got a crap ton of external rotation, they lose the internal rotation. But for every degree of ER they gain, they lose the IR. But if you add ER and IR together, it's the same on the right as it is on the left, assuming they have no capsular contracture or muscle tightness. So the reason that's important is because if all you did for that pitcher or that baseball player was assess IR, you would say, well, that's limited. But if you didn't compare it to their ER and add those two numbers together and compare it to the other side, you'd be making a faulty conclusion. That's a false positive, essentially, because you didn't actually look at total motion. So let me have you flip around, put your head on this side and your feet on that side. And we're going to compare his left total motion to his right total motion and see if he has a deficit right to left. Now, when you do external and internal rotation of the shoulder in supine, there's a couple of key points you got to make sure. I see this a lot, which is I'll see clinicians who let the person rest their arm on the table. You can't do that unless you have something underneath the elbow. And the reason is the moment the humerus drops below the axis of the shoulder joint, it's going to anteriorly glide his humeral head. You can actually see that as I drop this down. You can see that humeral head want to pop out forward. And that's going to be a very uncentrated, that's not a word, but uncentrated position for the humeral head to test. You want the humeral head centrated in the joint as much as you can. So you need to position this thing such that this bone is parallel to the table. And one might even argue you want it in the scapular plane, which would be elevated even more than that. So what you definitely don't want is below the horizontal. You can actually see on Andrew, when I'm in the horizontal, he's still a little protracted. Actually, I shouldn't be protracted. He's still a little anterior glid. His humeral head's coming towards me. So I may actually choose to assess him here. You can see now his humeral head has dropped back a little bit in the socket. That is a more neutral position for his shoulder than that is. And I might experience different range of motion testing it here than here. So I'll test him about here. I'm going to abduct him to 90. I'm going to use my inside hand to grab the humerus, and I'm going to pull just a little bit. Just a little bit. And what that's going to do, if that humeral head is sitting anywhere other than neutral, when you pull, it'll drop back down to center. So give him a little pull. Relax the arm by bending and extending the elbow. And then with this hand, the bottom hand, I'm going to rotate. Not this one, the one that is holding the humerus. Watch, down here. Not this one. The reason you don't want to push on this one, number one, is if he is unstable here and you push with the long lever, there's a good chance he's going to have apprehension and he's not going to relax, number one. Number two is if he has pain, again, I'm pushing with the long lever. And number three, when I rotate from my right hand, I can ensure that I'm spinning his humeral head on axis. And I'm not taking him off axis by using a longer lever. So here we go. Flex and extend, little traction, rotate from the bottom. Okay, so this is this your painful side? This is your non-painful side, right? All right. Without any overpressure, he's just about at 90 degrees. And you always have to apply overpressure because you have the big pec muscle stopping this motion. So you got to push through it a little bit and see how far we go. So here's R1. There's R2. Why don't we call that 110, let's say. I'm going to bring him back up, and now I'm going to check IR. Now I should mention, when you're doing ER-IR, one option is to have the arm off the table like this. The other option is to scoot him this way. Go ahead and scoot that way. And to stick a towel back here that puts him in the right position. I'll do this when I have a difficult time controlling the arm. Let's say scoot back this way. let's say this, you don't have a super heavy arm, but if somebody has a super heavy arm and you are having a really hell of a time controlling it, then you got to get your goniometer out and try to measure the damn stuff, then I'll definitely rest this on the table. But never rest it on the table unless you're ensuring that humerus is level. I think I've beaten that horse, right? So that's pretty clear. Okay. So let's go IR. So for IR, I'm going to grab the humerus again. I'm going to move the arm to what feels to be his neutral position, either scapular plane or level. And again, I'm not going to push from here. I see a lot of clinicians doing that, pushing the hand down. If I push the hand down, I'm going to want to shove that humeral head up towards me. I'm going to rotate from my bottom hand like this. Watch. From the bottom hand. You notice it's a much cleaner test. If I push from here, the tendency is for that thing to pop up. If I rotate from down here, it's very, very clean. So to me, it's about 30 degrees. So we've got 90 of external, 30 of pure internal. That's 120. Let's compare that to the other side. So this is the painful side. So let's see how we do. We'll get him up. Bend and extend the elbow to relax. And I'm going to rotate from my bottom hand. You guys can see that's about 80 degrees. We're not quite at the horizontal here. And apply a little overpressure, and I can only overpressure him to about 90 degrees. And is any pain with that?
No, not
okay,
much.
What do you feel?
Pec stretch.
So he feels a pec stretch. So that's a muscular restriction, obviously. And let's check his internal rotation. Same thing, grabbing here. Ooh. I don't know if you guys can see that, but he's got a lot more internal rotation on this side than he does on the other side. It's easily 45 or 50 degrees. So if I compare that now, 120 over there, I have 90 plus 45, 40 over here, that's 130. He's got more range of motion in his so-called restricted side in the total motion than he does over there. Let's think about that for a second. My concern with him is that he's got a labral injury. You can sit back up. Is that he has a labral tear. So with a labral tear, am I more concerned about his shoulder being stiff or unstable? I'm more concerned about his shoulder being unstable. So even though he had limited range of motion in midline external rotation, when we took him up into 90 degrees and measured total motion, the total motion on the painful side is actually larger than the total motion on the non-painful side. And within the presence of labrum and clicking and popping, I'm actually more concerned about shoulder instability, even though he's actually going to show me some limited range in some of those movements. So that is why doing the total motion, adding IR and ER and comparing them side to side is so damn important. Okay, that's all I got for you guys. See you guys next time. Peace out.